Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So I am just getting set up here. So I think that this is going to become a thing, probably weekly, these type of update videos. I've done them the past 2 Sundays. They've been pretty well received. It looks like decent number of views and lots of comments and people chatting and stuff, which is awesome. That's always kind of been the hope behind my YouTube channel and my videos, is that they'd spur discussion and that sort of thing, and so I'm really happy about that. Now, there's some other positive news I want to start this week's video off with, and that's that I think I'm going to start slowly, emphasis on the slowly, restarting regular video production. Now, what does this mean? Well, this means a couple things. So first of all, I will still be posting on the blog, if a little less frequently overall. I'll probably restart some of the regular series slowly. I mean, I'm not going to be pumping out a video every day or even a video every other day, at least not to start, but the plan is to kind of slowly get the ball rolling into October and maybe into, I would say, hopefully by December to middle of November, the channel will be almost back to where it was a couple months ago before I kind of got a little jaded, tired of YouTube. So that's the goal. Let's get the wheels turning on this YouTube channel train, and let's try to get some videos going. So I think station focuses are probably going to be something that I'm going to focus on early on. I might hold off on transit futures for a while just because there's so much work, and I want to be able to produce content and just talk to people, and I think that news style content will probably be the way to talk to people and the way to produce a bit shorter videos. I'll try to incorporate some B-roll, which I haven't been doing on these videos. I think I might just make these weekly update videos a regular occurrence and then do like B-roll for more focused news type and update type videos on different projects, plus whatever comes up, different styles of videos I might be interested in trying. I want to get back to vehicles of transit. I think that was an interesting series. I really want to get back to my quote-unquote roots, which is talking about the system on the ground, like going out and looking at the system, looking at different things in the city, things that I find interesting, things I find interesting in the transit system, and just making videos about them, making videos about systems, etc., things like that. I mean, I can't travel right now, but hopefully that can be something that happens in the future. I'd love to go to Calgary and Edmonton, and now that I'm in BC, that's very possible. I think when border restrictions and when COVID is less of a big issue, Seattle and Portland will probably finally get their day in the sun and they'll get videos. I'll probably take Amtrak there when that ends up happening, and so I'll probably do a video on Amtrak Cascades at that point. So there's lots of interesting content that I think is probably on its way slowly, because things are constantly changing, but you know, the wheels are going to start turning again. So I wanted to start this video off with that. Now, that will probably come along with some sort of change of scenery from this. I'm not sure what that change of scenery will look like, but it's probably likely it will happen. Now, I don't have all of my camera gear. I sold some of it. I'll reacquire a bit of camera gear. I honestly think that camera gear is something that you kind of swap through anyways. When I was working on YouTube kind of full-time earlier this year, I was swapping through camera gear pretty quickly because you just kind of find some things annoy you and some things you like, some things you don't like, and so you end up swapping in and out of different things depending on how you're feeling about different products and that sort of thing. And I think for me, I really like a more minimal setup. I think this camera shoots pretty decent quality footage, at least for the weekly update videos, so I'll probably shoot them on this Logitech 4K webcam. For more news-oriented content, I'll try to find something with better depth of field, and then I'll get out the Osmo Pocket for shooting those kind of walk-around videos. But yeah, I have lots of ambition, I think. I have regained the drive to make videos on a regular basis. And yeah, overall I'm pretty happy, pretty optimistic about things, and I think that as long as I take it slow, I probably can begin a relaunch. Now with that comes a few housekeeping items. So I've already talked to a few people about this, and some questions came up regarding things like Patreon. Like, will you do Patreon again? My answer is probably, but not immediately. I'm not going to have Patreon up when this video is launched, and I probably won't for a few weeks. I think I will relaunch Patreon because if I'm doing this more seriously again, I think it's a good way to kind of keep me accountable to my viewers, so to speak. I might experiment with doing different styles of Patreon. Some people like to do like a per video Patreon donation, which I think is an interesting concept. I'm not sure if I'm a fan of that, but I just will experiment a bit more with it. But yeah, I'd love to hear people's feedback on that. I think that if I'm producing regularly, it makes sense. If I'm not, it doesn't. Obviously, I don't want people to have to feel like they should donate or help the channel if the channel is not producing regular content. So part of that is to get these weekly videos started again, and then to start other videos flowing, and then I think once I feel like that's happening, I might restart Patreon. But that's something I'll definitely do if the channel gets back to where I hope it gets back to. Now, other topics, I'm trying to think of other ways of making the channel more viable, and so I think that merch may be something that ends up happening. I know that there's probably some things that we could create, Ellen and I, that would be kind of fun. It would be for the super fans, so to speak, but since we're getting pretty big at this point, I mean, we've been growing slowly as I've slowed video production down. I still think that there's probably some people out there who might be interested in that sort of thing, and so if you are, let me know in the comments. Send me a message on Discord. Discord is really important. I feel like it's the interface I have with a lot of my viewers. I read the comments, well, I haven't been as much, but I will be reading the comments again as I'm starting to produce more regularly. But Discord's better. I mean, I actually engage in like lengthy discussions on Discord. I hope to get back into getting into some of the live chats and that sort of thing. If I restart Patreon, I'd restart doing monthly calls with patrons and chatting with people. And so Discord is a great community to get on, so I'll leave the Discord link in the video description. Definitely go join up there. I've relaunched, or at least got my Twitter reactivated. I've got my Instagram going, and so if you're not following me on Twitter and Instagram, please go do that. They're all good to go, open, ready for people to follow. I've had some account issues in the past, but everything is good now. You can go follow me. Please do. I really appreciate it. Send me a DM on Instagram or Twitter if you want. But yeah, so I'm getting the ball rolling. It's a big machine, YouTube, and even as like a small creator, there's like a ton of stuff that you have to kind of manage and think about, but I'm excited about the prospect of being able to get things rolling again. And so yeah, that's kind of my plan, is to start to do that. So, oh my goodness, we're almost 10 minutes into the video and I've just talked about housekeeping, but let's get talking on some news. So I've kind of focused news this week on just Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto. Not that there hasn't been any in Alberta or in other parts of the country, but transit news-wise this week, these were the things that stuck out to me. I'm going to start more regularly polling people on Discord about what they want me to talk about in these videos, and so there is some news items I'll talk about from Discord, but the first thing I want to talk about, Broadway Subway, some more contracts were announced, including signaling is going to Talus, which is probably expected because Talus already does the signaling on the rest of the SkyTrain, but that's exciting. Other quote-unquote news, more like news to me, is that there will be knockout panels in Broadway City Hall to allow for future station entrances, which I consider a huge win because that station needs more than one entrance, clearly. I get that there's not going to be a ton of quote-unquote, outside station travel, potentially, according to TransLink. But again, this is a major central destination. Even if, all things considered, this wasn't an interchange, it's still a central station. It's on an important corridor. It's going to be busy no matter what. So I think that a second entrance makes a ton of sense. And I think that densifying the city in that area, adding more high-rises, adding more housing, and just general density just makes sense because it's where two transit lines cross. It's kind of like Vancouver's Bloor and Yonge. But what's really cool about, I just called it Bloor and Yonge, Yonge and Bloor-Yonge Station. What's cool about it is that this is an interchange that will have entirely been built in the 21st century. I mean, pretty much all post-2008, which is really cool. So it's a young interchange connection. It's got to be probably the youngest subway interchange connection for both lines anywhere in Canada, which is really cool. So it's going to be an awesome station. The connection looks really nice. I mean, the Canada Line platforms are Spartan. They're minimal, but overall, the station itself looks like it's got a really good layout. It kind of reminds me of Barrie-UQAM in Montreal. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about the project. It seems like a pretty straightforward project. Tunnel launch at Great Northern Way. Emily Carr at that station that has Emily Carr added to the name. Then I believe going west and then being extracted at Arbutus. That's what I think is happening, but I could be wrong. It might be the other way. It might involve more TDMs. I doubt it, but that's totally possible. It's just a cool, straightforward project. It's going to probably be the longest subway section on the traditional Expo Millennium lines. It'll definitely be, I think. Which is going to be really cool. It's cool to see the Expo Millennium lines get a new subway section. Like, we haven't seen a new proper underground station on the Expo Millennium lines in a long time, unless you consider Inlet Center a proper subway station. So it's just going to be cool. Cool to see what new subway stations in Vancouver might look like. They all have one entrance, which is, again, I don't know how I feel about that. Hopefully second entrances are planned in so they can be added in the future. But overall, it's a cool project. I'm happy it's happening. Okay, so next, a lot more Ontario Line info has come out. It's basically been Metrolinx has released like detailed corridor studies for the southern portions of the line, which are kind of the replacement to the relief line itself, as well as the major addition, I would say, in the core, obviously, between Exhibition and the east end of the city. Honestly, the changes would appear very minimal if you weren't pretty engaged in discussions. The primary differences regard things like moving the stations so that heritage buildings are protected, basically trying to protect the project against NIMBYism. Not that I have anything against heritage buildings, just that I think that those are the kind of sticking points you're likely to see people grab onto. Like, oh my goodness, like this terrible project is going to destroy this beautiful old building. And so they've kind of moved things around to avert that. They've moved some stations so that they're better aligned under roadways so that it's easy to do a cut and cover build on them, which is clearly smart. Cut and cover is like the most underappreciated thing. It's the best way to build a subway, in my personal opinion. Sure, TBMs are cool and all, but they just require more space, right? And space between lines in particular actually just makes the experience worse because it means your transfers are longer. So I think that cut and cover is really cool. It also means that your stations don't need to be super deep because you can literally just dig your tracks like basically like one flight below the ground if you wanted. I mean, in New York, there's stations that are literally like that, where to cross from one side, one direction to the other, you literally have to go up to street level. Lots of systems like the Canada Line that were cut and cover aren't like that, but it's totally possible. And so I think cut and cover is cool. It's cool that more of it will probably be cut and cover. I know that the actual tunnels are still being done with TVMs, I believe, but the stations would be cut and cover instead of being a lot of mining required. And so, yeah, I think it's cool. The area around the distillery district, it looks great. Others have mentioned, I would probably agree, a Cherry Street station probably makes sense, particularly given that that's like a really central area in the future for Toronto. You've got the distillery district to the northwest, along with the streetcar connection on Cherry, as well as the Portlands to the south. And so having a station there would kind of be really nice, but I think that with East Harbour, the justification is kind of there in Metrolinx's mind that you don't need the Cherry station. The thing is, though, that the streetcar and the distillery are there right now. East Harbour is still kind of like a figment of everyone's imagination, and so I think that, yeah, having the Cherry station would be nice. Other than that, it's also been brought up that the Ontario Line is going to be using part of the old Queen streetcar subway tunnel that's under Queen Station. Pretty cool. Of course, that didn't stop people, quote-unquote, detractors, people who would like to see this project fail because they're very political about the project. Instantly, we're like, oh, this is a terrible idea. That space is so small. And I think it's just silly because obviously that tiny space that's kind of set aside for the streetcar platforms is not going to be sufficient. So obviously they're going to have to expand it. I think the point being made is just that like that's the general area of part of the station, that's going to form part of the station. Probably the mezzanine. Probably not platform level, but it's just going to be part of it. There's no way that the Ontario Line trains are going to fit in there or anything like that. And so that's cool, exciting, but come on, guys, be reasonable. Finally, GO stations. There's not a ton to say. The GO stations are all moving along. Cooksville is pretty close to being fully done, if not already fully done. It looks cool, but again, as many people have mentioned on Discord, it's kind of weird. Like, Metrolinx is spending so much money on this giant station in a location where they can't really increase GO service. And I mean, if they do increase Milton Line service, you kind of have to question, like, will there be room on, how much room on the trains will there be by the time you even get to Cooksville? But they added giant parkade with a really cool facade, fixture, and stuff. There's going to be the Hurontario LRT there, so I guess you could kind of argue that, like, people going to Port Credit and then downtown via the Lakeshore West could park there. I mean, I think that's actually not an unreasonable thing to say. But then it's weird that they removed the direct connection to the Hurontario LRT. So it's weird, but that's a cool station. Now, Bramley is another station. It's obviously on the Kitchener line. It's been coming along really nicely. It's not totally done or anything, but structure's coming along really far. Posted some pictures from Urban Toronto in the Discord, so if you're interested, you can go take a look there. I probably won't be interspersing a ton of pictures in these videos, as I mentioned, because it just takes more time, and I want to get this out like that. And plus, it takes exponentially more time, because then I have to do a render and all this stuff. And so, yeah, that's unlikely to happen, but it's cool to see that Bramley is almost done, and I'm excited. I think Bramley is going to be a really cool terminus station. It sucks it's in an industrial area, but it's a cool terminus for the Kitchener Line frequent service. Weston on the Kitchener Line is coming along, that fourth platform, I guess it is. Yes, fourth. I believe there's a side, an island, and this is going to be the fourth platform at Weston, so that's really cool to see. Mount Dennis on the Up Express is coming along. The Up Express, we're going to have a discussion about that later regarding stations on that line, or stations. Crosstown. We're going to have a discussion about the Crosstown stations. But Crosstown's coming along nicely. Stouffville line works are coming along. There's, I believe, some more renders were released for some grade separations. Basically, all the grades are being separated south of Unionville, which is probably not necessary, probably a big waste of money, but it's going to mean that the Kitchener line and the Stouffville line, as someone on Urban Toronto also mentioned, are basically going to be subways, fully grade separated, really cool, but then, again, that kind of defeats the purpose of not just having a subway. Like, why don't we just make it like the REM in Montreal? So, lots of questions, but that's what we're seeing for the various GO stations. Progress on the Steeles Avenue grade separation at Milliken Station as well. So lots of progress. Very exciting stuff. In terms of the REM, not a ton to report back on this week, but there's been like rumblings that there might be a big expansion to that project announced at some point. And so when that happens, obviously I'm going to make a video about that to talk about that, because I think REM is going to be one of the most influential transit projects in Canada. It's crazy. It's almost going to be the size of the SkyTrain in Vancouver in one single shot. Now, to be fair, the SkyTrain has a lot more new built underground sections and stuff, but the REM has, you know, platform screen doors, Wi-Fi, all this stuff. So I want to see the SkyTrain get up to those REM standards. That's going to be my one of my main arguments I'm going to keep making is let's improve the SkyTrain. Let's get it closer to what the REM is, because the REM is really nice. But yeah, that's the main news items I wanted to cover this week. Some other news items that people mentioned in Discord were the cutting of the downtown express routes in Toronto. I kind of support this. I feel like it's a waste of money. You're deadheading the buses a lot of the time. They're charging like double fares. It's basically just GO. I almost feel like you should say, hey, GO, we're going to be cutting these services. If you think it's worthwhile that you replace them, you can do that. Otherwise, these people can just take the conventional transit system like everyone else does. I just think that providing service on these commuter routes doesn't make a ton of sense. It would be better to just take those buses and put them on other routes to make them more regular, so you can build, honestly, a lot more ridership. Because if you have a bus that you've just dedicated to another route all day, well, then you can build all-day ridership on that route, rather than this kind of inconsistent ridership of the downtown express routes where it's only peak in, peak out, and during COVID, it's not probably a ton of ridership. There's also some proposed cuts to late night service, which I'm obviously against. There was a debate about whether late night service and all night, like 2 a.m. and after service, is really the same thing. But I think to passengers they are. I think late nights, you're thinking, I'm going out somewhere late at night. You're probably thinking, hey, I could be back at 3 a.m. I don't know. So having the knowledge that there's going to be a bus at 1, there's going to be a bus at 2, or there's going to be a bus at 12 is nice. And so I think that cutting any kind of late night service hurts the way transit feels, because transit is meant to be something that you feel like you can use at any time, at least when you want it to replace cars. And so if you don't have that, it's not good. Someone else mentioned Go Alert. Oh yes, I want to make a video on Go Alert, and it's definitely planned. So that's something you can look forward to. That's kind of going to be in the style of Demystified or something like that. Yeah. Sydney Metro just announced a new corridor for Metro West, which is exciting for sure. Sydney Metro is a super exciting project, and as I've mentioned before, I think it's better than the Metro Tunnel in Melbourne. So, you know how I feel about that. And then someone else mentioned the Ontario Line stuff, which I've already covered. So let's continue. So I thought it would be kind of a fun challenge, because some people were also doing this in the Discord, to talk about my favorite stations in a couple cities. So I'm going to do Vancouver and Toronto today, but I might turn it into a video where I talk about favorite stations in other cities. So yeah, let's begin. So for Toronto, I think my favorite stations would be Dundas West, which is awesome because streetcars, subway, GO trains, Up Express, so much different service, and a lot of potential in the future, especially when it gets to tunnel. So that's one of the 3 I would list for Toronto. I would also list Union for obvious reasons. Union is the country's biggest transit hub. It's incredible. It has streetcars, TTC buses, GO buses, Via Rail, long-distance services, commuter services with GO, more frequent regional rail services with GO, Up Express, TTC Subway. If I didn't mention TTC Subway, direct connection to like all of downtown Toronto via the Path. Just a beautiful building, giant, with tons of restaurants and food and different offerings inside, connected to the Scotiabank Arena. It's just an awesome station. I think that it's one of the best in North America, and with all the upgrades happening, it's kind of going to be de facto the nicest station in North America, bar none. So I think that Union, super exciting. And then I was going to say, the third one, I would say Bay. Bay is such a nice station, in my opinion. It's a small-ish station, like it's not super crazy, not a ton going on, but underappreciated downtown. I feel like it's probably one of the less used downtown stations. You know, it's not Queen, it's not King. Apologies that I don't know the specific ridership stats for Bay, but I love Bay. I love the back entrance into Yorkville. I'm not like one of these super elite rich people who can afford much stuff in Yorkdale, but I really appreciate the way there's like the nice back entrance to Bay in Yorkville, and so I just think Bay is probably one of my favorite conventional subway stations in Toronto. I love Rosedale as well, Davisville, but yeah, I would say Union, Bay, and Dundas West are probably my favorite subway stations in Toronto. And next I want to do Vancouver, because I thought should kind of balance it out. I'm going to do these ones rapid fire, but Inlet Center, because it's just a cool, unique station, how they push the box under, I think it's Ioko Road? I want to say it's Ioko Road. So I love Inlet Center. Lougheed, I really love Lougheed because of the cool platform arrangement. And then Commercial Broadway, because Commercial Broadway is the first non-terminus station in Canada to use a Spanish solution, and it's just really cool. It's got lots of platforms, it's big, it's not necessarily a great transfer, but it's just a cool station. And so I would say Commercial Broadway would be probably my favorite station in Vancouver, as I've said in a previous video. So a thought about what cities lack and what some current projects are doing. So what I wanted to do was talk about what Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal are doing, and kind of my thoughts on it quickly. because I thought it would be kind of interesting to think at a high level about what the different cities are doing with all their transit projects, because so many transit projects on the go, and what are they doing? So I feel like Montreal is focusing a lot on the long distance network, which is not really surprising to anyone. Previously, they were focusing on nothing because there was nothing being built in Montreal. There is the Blue Line extension happening, and there are some, whispers of other lines and tramways and other things being built. But the thing is, Montreal's in this weird kind of state that Toronto was in a few years ago, where we're talking about a lot of projects, but nothing is really confirmed / under construction besides the REM. And so, yeah, Montreal's focusing on long distance with the REM, but I hope to see like tramways popping up, more metro extensions, REM extensions, kind of a broader expansion to the city's transit network, because I think that Montreal has a ton of potential, and I think it's one of the most interesting cities in the country, if not the most interesting city in the country. And so Montreal is focusing on the broad regional network. Toronto is clearly just doing everything at once. I mean, right now, Eglinton, Finch, and Hurontario LRTs are all under construction. So you've got two straight-up tramways, the Finch West LRT and the Hurontario LRT. The Finch West being a little nicer, in my opinion, because of how nicely integrated the terminus stations are to their locations, being kind of like semi-underground in the case of Humber College, and being fully underground integrated with the Finch West subway station at Finch West. And then Eglinton is literally a metro for about half its length, and so that's really cool. And then you have the various GO projects going on, and the thing about the GO projects is they're like single units. They fix a bit of the network, or they improve a bit of the network, but there's not currently like the full RER program happening. That's still being procured, but again, we're seeing a ton of movement with station improvements. Montreal has a few station improvement projects still going, accessibility improvements, etc., but it's all much slower and less extensive than Toronto's. And then finally, you also have things like the planned expansion of the streetcar network into the Portlands, the expanded, or at least the planned expanded streetcar fleet, improvements to kind of ordering a large number of ZEV buses. I guess the buses and stuff are something Montreal's doing, but I think that overall it's just clear Toronto is doing more on the local network, they're doing more on the regional network, and so it's super exciting. That being said, what they both share is that Via is getting new trains, and that's going to be really exciting, and Montreal and Toronto will benefit from that. Now, on the Vancouver side, it seems a little slow, in my personal opinion. I mentioned before how I want Vancouver to be more ambitious, and yeah, it really shows, because right now, we have Broadway Subway underway, and Langley's being studied, and that's about it. There's just like two projects that are currently on the go, and I feel like we need to be a bit more ambitious. Yeah, like Broadway Subway is going to go to UBC. It's kind of like everyone knows that's going to happen, but it's more of a question of when. But we're not thinking about enough projects, I think, because when we're done the Broadway Subway to Arbutus, and we're done the Langley or Fleetwood extension, whatever ends up getting built, I mean, it's clear that you need to extend those lines. So I guess naturally the next projects will be to extend those lines. But I think by around 2030, both of those lines will be either under construction, if not close to completion, because Broadway Subway's 2025, 2026 probably for completion, similar for Fleetwood / Langley extension. And so we need to start talking about what we're doing next, because that's less than 10 years from now, and in transit time, that's not very much. We need to be thinking about what transit projects come next, and we need to be more ambitious. I think that, okay, we're kind of doing two at a time right now. They're not two major projects, since Langley's kind of like a suburban extension, pretty much as cheap as possible, all elevated, minimal stations, kind of like Burquitlam. For example, they all look really similar to Burquitlam, and so they're like kind of cookie-cutter stations. And the Broadway extension isn't like this crazy subway. Like, it's nice, but it's not the TYSSE in Toronto. Now, to be fair, Vancouver's doing a lot of quality of life stuff, upgrading stations, etc., but I just want to see more progress. So whether that be a new line to the North Shore, potentially expanding stations on the Expo and Canada lines, we need to do it eventually. Maybe now that we don't have a ton of projects on the go, that's a good idea. Get the Burnaby Mountain Gondola built. That's an obvious project that we need. A North Shoreline, if I didn't already mention that, makes sense. Maybe start looking at Hastings and converting more rapid bus lines to rapid transit. 41st Avenue, Oak Ridge is going to be super crazy in the future, and I think having a line between Joyce and 41st probably makes sense. A bit of an orbital line that could continue north to Brentwood or Holdham or Gilmore. So those are kind of my thoughts on what each of the big cities in Canada are doing right now. And yeah, Vancouver, come on, let's go. Let's try to pick up the pace. You're losing your transit leadership position, I feel like. So next, the Eglinton Crosstown. I said I was going to talk about it, and so what do I have to say? Someone made a beautiful point, again on Urban Toronto. I spent a few hours on Urban Toronto on the forums today. I haven't in a long time. I really appreciated it. Someone made a beautiful point. And what they basically said is like, the Eglinton Crosstown surface stations suck, which we all know. If you've been following the project, they're not really great. They're these kind of tiny stop shelters, and yeah, I get it. Like, the trains are going to come really frequently most of the day. But, I mean, that's what's supposed to happen on the streetcars too, and I've spent many times waiting 20 to 15 to 10 minutes waiting for a Spadina streetcar in the snow or rain, and it's not particularly pleasant. And so yeah, it's disappointing that these median streetcar stations look the way they do. LRT stations, oh my, that's concerning. Because they just don't provide a ton of weather protection. Even if they provided like an enclosed shelter, kind of like a miniature version of what the GO stations provide, or even just like something that was mostly enclosed, kind of like some of the bus shelters with like heaters in it, that would be great. I don't know if it's really a width issue, but those kind of things would be really nice, and I think that we're going to regret not installing them, because I think that they'll probably get installed eventually because people will complain. With all that in mind, I think that some people who pointed out that we could just have like a fully enclosed thing, sort of like what the Highway 7 at Vaughan Metropolitan Centre Viva Station looks like. Something like that would be perfect for the above-ground Eglinton Crosstown stations. I think people would probably use them more because they feel kind of more like stations and less like streetcar stops, like what I just referred to them as, because that's what they basically feel like. So something like that would be great. Someone even mentioned that the regular Viva stations are nicer than the Eglinton Crosstown surface stations. So yeah, disappointing. And so you think, oh, well, Toronto's being frugal, right? Because we don't have the money to build big stations. But then look at the TYSSE, this massive line with gigantic stations. Each one has 2 entrances, even though maybe that's not actually justified in all these locations. They have big bus terminals that probably are wildly underused, massive parking lots, fully underground, all this unnecessary scope and scale to the infrastructure. And then when you need the money, just a tiny bit of money to fully close over your LRT station, no money for you, right? So I think that it's disappointing to see the way the Crosstown is being kind of value engineered relative to other projects. I mean, it's kind of a no-win situation for Metrolinx. If they spend more money, then there'll be the Metrolinx critics, the people who think that Metrolinx is just inherently a bad thing, who don't think of Metrolinx as something that needs to be fixed so that it can be that regional transit agency Toronto needs. They think of Metrolinx as just this terrible agency that's corrupt and that is always, it's always supporting the politician who they don't like. Some people will see it as Metrolinx doing that. I think that we just need to be smarter about things, and we need to be rational, and in a situation like this, we should say, okay, like the design of that is not great. Let's just swap it out. It's just a basic surface shelter. It could be swapped out pretty easily. So that's what I have to say on the Eglinton Crosstown and the not-so-great stations. Now, kind of a last topic I wanted to cover today. It's a minor one, but I have talked a bit about how tall buildings don't make a city. But here is my kind of counter to that, which is that tall buildings are still cool. As you guys know, I think, I've mentioned before in blog posts and on videos, I think that tall buildings are interesting. I don't think that they're great, and I don't think that we should be only aiming for tall, because at the end of the day, tall buildings typically seem to end up being super expensive. Why is that? Because it's just expensive. As you go taller and taller, it gets exponentially more expensive, especially when you're getting into the hundreds of meters tall, right? But exciting news, nonetheless, is to see Vancouver is getting its first, substantially more than 200 meter tall tower in the Metrotown area. It seems to be, mostly confirmed. I'm late to the party on this one, but Concord Pacific, who's like a major developer in Canada, has proposed a 220-meter tall tower in the Metrotown area, which is very interesting. Metrotown is like a very transit-centric community. It grew a ton due to the SkyTrain being there, and so it's very cool to see major towers like this going in. The mall is actually being slowly redeveloped. The mall is actually called Metropolis at Metrotown, but the mall is being redeveloped slowly to be turned into like a dense street grid, new type of mall. Like, you've probably seen these type of malls where they try to simulate like a town center, and the one at Metrotown and like the parts that have been redeveloped so far actually look great. They're really cool. They have like some office space, some residential, some restaurants at ground level, and other retail. It's really cool, and so I'm kind of hyped up. I think Metrotown has a really bright future. I think that slowly kind of whittling away the mall and replacing it with awesome outdoor ground level retail, as well as maybe some more elements that are kind of like Brentwood Town Center and like the incredible work they've done at the amazing Brentwood would be awesome. And so I'm super happy with that. I think that kind of putting a tall tower at an important spot like Metrotown is really cool. I mean, it's literally called Metrotown. That's kind of because it's Metro Vancouver, I think, but it's also maybe a bit because the SkyTrain's there, and the SkyTrain is a metro, and so it's a cool place. Cool to see a tall tower going in there. I mean, there is a proposed 250-meter tall tower at Lougheed Town Center. I think it's a little more unlikely because it's not proposed by someone as kind of quote-unquote reputable as Concord Pacific, but Vancouver is finally breaking that 200-meter ceiling, and I'm happy about it. I think it's good. Vancouver has super crazy expensive land, and it's cool to see that we're actually building up. Obviously, we have a lot of high-rises, but it's kind of weird for a city with so many high-rises to not have many tall high-rises, and so that's cool. And then on the other side of the country, in Toronto, a big step was taken on the One project. So it's called The One. It's at Bloor Yonge. It's a very cool tower. 308 meters, I believe, with 416 units. 416, the kind of famous Toronto area code baked in. Very cool tower. It's one of these quote-unquote super skinny towers that you see a lot of in like New York. It's not as skinny as like, for example, 428 Park Avenue, but it's still like a skinny, cool-looking tower. It's done by Foster & Partners, the architecture firm. They're really famous. Norman Foster is a starchitect, quote unquote. Like, he's super famous. He designs a lot of Apple stuff. And, ooh, interesting. It turns out there's probably going to be a flagship Apple store in the base of this building, right on Bloor and Yonge, which is really cool. Bloor and Yonge seems like this place that's slowly developing. There's a bunch of older offices and buildings there, but it feels like a lot of the energy is not really there. It's more like Southcore near Union Station. It would be really cool to see Bloor and Yonge become like an area that's as important, or that feels as important above ground as it does below ground. Like, obviously it's a hugely important subway interchange, but it would be cool to see the whole area redeveloped, turned into a lot more offices, etc. And I think it would be helpful to improve accessibility from other areas of the city. Now, as I said, 308 meters. What's the news? Well, as it turns out, it seems they finally have their permits to go above ground. So this project had been fully below ground up until like a couple days ago. They just got their permits to go above ground, and so the first columns / kind of tilted pillars are going into the project. It's super exciting. I'm just happy. I think it's cool that Canada is finally getting a skyscraper taller than 300 meters, a quote-unquote super tall. There's a couple more proposed in Toronto, but this is, as far as I know, the furthest along one. And yeah, I'm just happy. I think it's cool. I think that towers like this are not obviously something you want everywhere, but I think in a city like Toronto, such an important global economic hub, I think that a tower of 300 meters is kind of like obvious. I think that we could have a 400-meter tower at this point. Chicago does, I believe. So I'm just happy to see Toronto skyline is getting a bit more intrigue and a bit more impressive. And same can be said with Vancouver's. However, it is a bit strange how you can kind of see this distinction. A lot of the tallest towers now being built in Metro Vancouver are in Burnaby and not in Vancouver, and that's because Burnaby is not as restrictive as Vancouver is with like view cones and height restrictions and stuff. So you now have like almost half of the top 10 tallest buildings in Metro Vancouver are in Burnaby, not in Vancouver, which is interesting. So it'll be interesting to see how this dynamic plays out. It's weird, though, just how Metro Vancouver is much more decentralized, and it feels like it's growing more decentralized. Whereas Toronto, because regional transit hasn't been great, is super centralized around downtown Toronto. So you have this giant downtown core that's just ballooning. But then your regional hubs like Scarborough Town Centre, North York Centre, etc., they don't feel nearly as impressive as like Metrotown or Brentwood, for example, in Vancouver. And so cool to see how these two cities are diverging and how they're different and stuff. Anyways, it's been like 40 minutes. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you're excited about the prospect of the channel returning. I'd love to hear your comments. What do you think? How should I expand the the business opportunity of the channel? Should I do merch? Should I do Patreon? What new Patreon things should I do? Should I do this or that? What are your guys' ideas? What are your comments on the various stuff I talked about today? Leave them down below. Thanks as always for watching. Follow me on Instagram, Twitter, join the Discord, and thank you so much, guys. I'll see you next week.